Welcome to the Avanti Women Panasonic Speaker Series. Here today we're going to discover the recipe for success with one of our Avanti Women members, Victoria Amaral, Vice President of Aon Hewitt of Client Services, and we're going to have a theme this month around personal and professional networking. So welcome, Victoria. We're excited to be spending time with you today and learn a little bit more about your recipe of success.
Great, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so in terms of, we're very excited to have you. And in terms of your background, we really want to know more about you being a fitness fanatic. You're a mom. You've got this corporate job, and you're doing a really great job with that. Tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got there and how it all kind of began.
That's a really long story. I'm not sure how long you have. So I'd say my journey started on a very different path. So I think my advice to many is just around being pretty flexible around what that looks like. The goal was to be a corporate lawyer, and somehow I, came into the corporate business world, leading contact centers. So I went from contact centers in-house to the whole world of outsourcing, which is a really dynamic industry. And the journey it took me on has been incredible, from an operational background through to being president of a corporate services organization, and through that connecting through some amazing groups. Young Presidents Organization, where I've met with just some amazing leaders in the business, young professional leaders. I've had the opportunity to sit on a number of boards and be able to give back to a number of not-for-profits. And I've been open to the journey and wherever it was going to take me. So, my advice, and as I look at the next step in my career, is always that I need to be running to something rather than away from something. So where I'm going to be challenged, where I'm going to diversify myself and continue to grow.
I love it. And through that, through those changes and through all those different experiences, tell us about, how you did some of that networking, both professionally and personally, because, when I looked at your profile, and I know it's been a few years since we've connected, you really have an abundance of networks at your fingertips. And I think our Avanti Women members would like to know more about, some of those secrets that you may have.
So I'll tell you first, I needed to learn from some of my mistakes. I'd say I became my first executive role was in my very early 20s. And I got there through a lot of grit and hard work, and constantly proving to myself and others that I could deliver. But I think the thought process at that point, it was me against the world, and not how much I needed to embrace my colleagues, my team, my clients, and everyone else around me, and that people do business with people they like, people they trust, people they want to do business with. So I very quickly learned that I needed to change my style, that to be successful in business needed, for me to embrace others along that journey. So I learned, one, to never burn a bridge. That was one of those things that I made some early mistakes on in my career. I learned that you never know who someone's connected to. So, from my standpoint, I connect to every single person I meet, whether they be the hockey parents at my children's hockey games that I see every week at practice and at games, whether it be suppliers to my business, clients, friends, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm consistently, reaching out and establishing a network, doing it when I don't need it, building, with the intent to give back, so generosity rather than greed in terms of how I connect with others, and a big pay-it-forward sort of approach. So introducing other people for no other personal gain, other than the fact at some point there might be a reason for us to connect and work together.
Right. I love what you said there. There's some really good nuggets of information there. So when you are doing your networking, is there a technique that you're using that really works for you? I know you said you got to build that trust. Is there some advice that maybe you would have that when you were 20 years younger you may have applied?
That there needs to be a personal connection. So when I reach out to people, one, it's getting over the hurdle of doing that. So for those who are more naturally introverted, it's a place of discomfort for many to do that. I first of all say there's a lot that can come sitting behind a computer screen, what I call electronic courage. So take the first step,
right,
by reaching out to someone electronically. It's a heck of a lot easier than walking up to someone, at a dinner party or event, and having that conversation. Once you've had that personal connection, bring it into the real life. So as much as LinkedIn and other social media sites are fantastic for connecting with people, it's doing so in a virtual world. So bringing that to life. So for me, I'll take YPO. It was a great example. I joined as a newbie into that organization, one of the youngest members at the time, feeling at the time quite intimidated by these amazing presidents and CEOs that I stood before as a relatively new president myself. And I started to reach out to these individuals and said, I'd love to pick your brain. Tell me, what's made you successful? How are you here today? Talk to me about your personal life, your kids. What do you do for fun? What are you passionate about? And through learning about who they are as individuals and what their stories are, makes them want to ask me about myself and what are my passions, where do I want to go, and people want to help people. Yeah. So naturally, you start to do business with these people, and they help connect you, whether it be in the corporate world and obtaining new clients, whether it be negotiating a better deal with a supplier, or whether it just be for fun and going out and just having a glass of wine.
Yeah,
with
right.
Some of these folks.
Absolutely. So what would you say some of the key skills would be to be a leader today? I mean, you're the vice president of Aon Hewitt, and you're running client services, which is all customer service, relationship, and it's an international role. So, what does that look like, and what is the day-to-day, and what are those key skills that you need to be on top of your game?
So, a number of things. I mean, I first of all, I'd say I build a really strong team. So I surround myself with great people. I'm never intimidated by the fact that I think someone's smarter, more knowledgeable about something. I certainly hope they do. I'm not the subject matter expert. I'm a connector of people. I hope that I motivate others. I inspire them to do well. So that's, first and foremost. I will also tell people that you need to love what you do. Not every day. I'm not going to say that 100% of my day I love it. There's administrative tasks. There's things that you need to do. But that 80-20 rule. You really need to enjoy getting up and doing what it is that you're going to do every day. So be passionate about whatever it is you choose. And next is leverage those around you. I think I sit in the role I do at Aon today. I sort of reached a reflection point when I was living and working in the U.S. and I wanted to come back to Canada, and I happened to be talking to someone in my network about just the journey. I wasn't looking for a job at Aon. I didn't know that any existed, but purely through the dialogue and through that connection, out came an opportunity, an introduction, and 13 job interviews later.
Wow.
A job.
Wow, that's fantastic. Wow, so 13 interviews. So do you have a role model? Is there someone that you look up to, and maybe a hero or a heroine that Victoria looks up to, or superpowers?
Well, when it comes to networking, I'll tell you there's, someone definitely whom I think is a guru at it, and it's the author of the book Never Eat Alone.
Yes.
Keith Ferrazzi.
Yeah, great book.
So from a networking perspective, I think there's a lot that he can teach, through his book and through his practices. In terms of leaders, I wouldn't say specifically that I have a role model, not because I don't look for one, not that I don't hope to have a mentor. I think I've just learned a lot in my career from those whom I don't aspire to be like. For me, I can say there's snippets of individuals and leaders that I've worked with that I think are fantastic. Ones who, oftentimes bring the things that I don't. Whether that's patience, something I very early on in my career was probably lacking a little bit in terms of how aggressive and driven I wanted to get. So maybe some of that's come with age. I'll say quite quickly as well. Others who have taught me. One leader in particular who I remember once telling me that it was okay to be vulnerable. That the professional face I put on every day, wasn't something that as I looked to build strong relationships with people and have them see that I'm real, that it was okay just to be Victoria, to show feelings and emotions and talk openly and transparently with others.
In your career, you have done really well, international exposure. You've done some phenomenal work. You talk about surrounding yourself, you're constantly networking. What advice would you have for our members when it comes to how do they get to position themselves to get to that stage where, yes, they continue to network, but what else do they need to do to get there?
So I'd say there's a number of different things. There's some great tools to leverage, certainly. LinkedIn being one I'm a huge proponent of. I'm a very early adopter of it. There's ways to utilize it to reach out, whether it be industry-specific, role-specific, people specifically in roles you want to reach out to. And I also think that there's some fantastic networking groups, and people who come together with common interests, such as Avanti Women. That I would encourage, women to get connected to. Put yourself consistently in places where you're going to be able to connect. And for those who aren't more naturally extroverts, like myself, sort of the notion of fake it till you make it.
Yeah,
right?
Interesting. Mm-hmm. So you're saying you're not an extrovert?
No, I am.
I was going to say, you're
Yeah.
definitely extroverted. And you'd have to be when it comes to the amount of networking you're doing, both personally and professionally. So what other advice would you have for, someone like in a Victoria 20 years ago, when you're still probably, in diapers 20 years ago. But seriously, what other advice would you have for, you give yourself if you had to do it over again?
I would have started it much earlier. I really would have. It's funny, I talk to my children now about the importance of the relationships they build and how that will help them long term in their in their own career and personal lives. I wish I'd had that advice and or had my parents given it, believed in it. I think had I started a lot sooner, I'd be further along the journey potentially than I am today. And I would come at it with less apprehension originally. I think initially I thought, are people going to question me and why I want this, and question my intentions, around it, and be gracious in their time and in giving of themselves and their advice. And the one thing I found is people absolutely are, particularly when you establish, again, that personal connection with them.
Yes, very important. Great. So if you had to give someone maybe some nugget of information, that key recipe for success, and it had 3 key ingredients, what would be your recipe for success?
So establishing one's personal brand, I think, is critical.
Nice.
Maintaining consistency, in the brand that you portray, being relevant, and being authentic.
I like that. That's great. That's very you. Very true, very you. So we talked about resources, we talked about how to do things. I would like to talk a little bit more about your volunteer work. I think as a networker myself that volunteer work has always been key. What resources are out there, not only in the GTA, that you've come across that really helped you get to the amount of people that you have right now in your social media and your networking forum? So how did that volunteer work, how did those organizations help you get to where you are today?
So first of all, there are a number of organizations that are looking for volunteers. There are many resources to go and identify those opportunities, like a charity village, where you can go online and search for roles. I would encourage to choose those that one is passionate about. Again, back to the notion of you have to enjoy getting up and doing whatever it is you're going to do every day. I started by sitting on a number of not-for-profit boards, smaller, and they've grown to much larger size and scale and scope and responsibility. So it started small with a vocational services organization. I believe greatly in helping those that are either new to the country and finding employment, or those who are underemployed. So it was a great organization that I believed a lot in, and through there I met a number. In fact, actually, my boss today, I referred him to sit on that board with me, and we got further, connected, on that journey. I also subsequently volunteered for the McMichael Gallery for a fundraiser and met a really great individual who subsequently nominated me for the Children's Aid Foundation board that I sit on today. That one, I sit on that board and I'm personally passionate about it. I was a child out of care, having been adopted myself, so I believe very much in the work that the agency does, and the fundraising that we do and the support of the Children's Aid Societies. But I also sit with an incredible cast, on the board of directors. Many of whom are, when we talk about how small the world, many of whom are clients, today. So I've furthered, our relationship that way, and I have an in-depth conversations with some of the top executives, with some of the banks and others that I would support today at Aon. But I also personally have felt fulfilled, through that process, and I've met some really wonderful people who believe in giving back, many of whom are either, mothers or others that have similar interests to me, or from a business perspective. So I'd highly recommend it. It's been, an amazing way for me to continue the journey from a networking perspective.
Of course, and thank you for all that contribution out there, because we definitely need strong leadership and I know you have a very strong voice. So what would be your one skill, a woman of your career experience, both professionally and personally with your networking, what would be the one skill that you look for in your potential? You talk about having a strong team, right? So what's that one skill that's key that you could share with our members that if we could really develop? This is what VPs are looking for.
Confidence.
Confidence.
I can tell you when someone walks in for an interview with me, it's not the fact that they have an MBA, the initials sitting behind their name. I'm looking for someone in my world where relationships matter significantly. I'm looking for someone who comes in with a great deal of confidence, and I know will exude that to our clients and their colleagues.
Great, that's good. And my next question is really, how has mentorship, how has that been maybe a training ground or a foundation for you during your personal and professional networking? You're definitely a guru when it comes to that. So how did mentoring play a role in that?
I've mentored, a lot of, individuals over the years, and, I'd say it's allowed me to reflect upon my own career as I give advice to, typically younger, professionals along their journey. So as I sit back and reflect and they ask me questions that I wish I had someone to ask those to 15 or 20 years ago, it's caused me to look back and look inside and, focus on those things, that, not only do I value now and I've maybe learned the hard way, but to be able to, impart some of those things and bring that even back to my team on a regular basis. Some of the folks that I mentor aren't necessarily the direct reports that I support on an everyday basis, but I learn a lot, from these individuals, and I hope that I can bring it back in a number of aspects of my life.
Of course, very rewarding. That's great. So, Victoria, I really love some of the messages that you're sharing with us today. How do you differentiate between that personal and that professional networking? Like, is there a different technique with how you would do it personally versus professionally?
So I don't believe there is a personal versus a professional network. I believe there is a single network, tied back to that individual brand. Now, what I choose to tell people that I might meet on a personal level versus those I meet professionally are different. But it's still all the brand that is Victoria Amaral. So as I meet individuals and I look to build my network, I never do it with the thought that one is purely going to be personal and one's professional, because they constantly cross over.
Of course, great. And so how do you make time? Like, you're into fitness, you're getting married, you're a mom, you play hockey, you got this powerhouse job. Like, how do you manage it? Like, how do you make time to network?
You have to make time. My assistant, I'm sure, sometimes gets incredibly aggravated with me because, there are, I'm going to say on a weekly basis, probably a couple of lunches, a number of coffees, and the occasional, dinner meeting or networking. It is when you're unemployed and looking for a job, it's very much a full-time job. You know, but when you're busy with your day job, your life, you have to make time for it. And you need to think of it as just part of your job, quite honestly. Regardless of whether you're, you know, in a sales or a client-facing role, you should always be networking. So, you know, whether that's just a few hours a week, you know, or more. The fact is, there are tools. You know, so for me, I'm an avid multitasker. So I can be on don't ever tell anyone this, but while I'm on a conference call, I could be, you know, quickly on a LinkedIn and you know, liking something or sharing someone with something. So it's, you know, constantly being on, and committing to make time to do it.
Yeah. I actually schedule networking and put goals to that. So I must meet 30 new people within 60 days. So that way every other day I'm busy networking, especially in the business that we do. It has to be about networking. I have a tough question for you, and I really want to know, what does Victoria do when you get that rejection, when you are trying to network with someone where, you know, you're making the phone calls, you're making the emails, you're trying to make that connection, and it's not going anywhere? Like, what happens when it comes to you can't get that forward, or you're getting that rejection? How do you handle that? What do you do? What's your plan of attack?
So I'm not one to give up easily. So I'm quite tenacious, and I try alternate ways to get around that. You know, I will almost always try a warm introduction if possible, and if not, then a little bit of levity, you know, in humor and you know, an introduction to someone, and making it really clear I'm not asking for something.
Right.
Right. I'm here to establish a relationship. One never knows where it's going to go, and typically making it about them. For the most part, that works. On the rare occasion where it doesn't, I've just learned you can't take it personally.
Right. Very good advice. I'd like to thank Victoria Amaral for joining us today, Vice President of Client Services with Aon Hewitt. Some great tips and tricks around professional and personal networking. Please follow us on #AW Recipe for Success, and we'll see you at our next event. Thank you.